In the quiet town of Ina, Illinois, population just over 2,300, the Dardeen family appeared to be living an ordinary, peaceful life. Russell Keith Dardeen, who went by his middle name, was 29 years old and worked as a treatment plant operator at the Rand Lake Water Conservancy District. His wife, Ruby Elaine Dardeen, 30 years old, worked at an office supply store in Mount Vernon. The couple had a 3-year-old son named Peter, and Elaine was 7 months pregnant with their second child, a daughter they planned to name Casey. The Dardeens were deeply involved in the local Baptist church, where Keith sang lead vocals while Elaine played piano. By all accounts, they were a loving family with no known enemies, no financial troubles, and no involvement in criminal activity. The mobile home sat between Illinois Route 37 and the former Illinois Central Railroad tracks just north of the Franklin County line. But Keith harbored growing concerns about the area's violence. Jefferson County had experienced more than 10 murders over the preceding 2 years, including a case where a teenager killed his parents and 3 siblings. Keith's fear was so intense that when a young woman came to the door one night asking to use the phone, he refused to let her inside. He had even expressed a desire to move his family away. Tragically, they would never get that chance. November 18, 1987, began with one troubling detail. Keith's guardian did not show up for his 7 a.m. shift at the water treatment plant. This was profoundly out of character for the exceptionally reliable worker. He hadn't called in, and throughout the day, calls to the Dardeen home went unanswered. Keith's supervisor reached out to both of Keith's parents. Neither had heard from the son. Kit's father, Don Dardeen, contacted the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. That evening, at approximately 6:30 p.m., Don met deputies at his son's trailer with keys to unlock the door. What they discovered inside would haunt everyone involved for the rest of their lives. In the bedroom, 3 bodies lay tucked into bed together. Elaine Dardeen had been bound with duct tape and gag. She and 3-year-old Peter had been brutally beaten to death with a baseball bat, the very same bat that Keith had given Peter as a birthday gift. The beating Elaine endured had been so severe that it had induced labor, causing her to deliver the daughter, Casey, 2 months premature. The newborn infant had also been beaten to death. The scene suggested that whoever committed these murders had taken their time. The area had been cleaned up, and the bodies had been carefully arranged in bed. There was no sign of forced entry. Keith was nowhere to be found, and his red 1981 Plymouth was missing. The following day, November 19th, hunters walked through a field near Ina made another grim discovery. They found Keith Dardeen's body. He had been shot 3 times in the head, and his genitals had been mutilated. Keith's red Plymouth was found parked near the police station in Benton, approximately 11 miles from the Dardeen home. Blood evidence inside the vehicle indicated that Keith had been murdered inside his own car. Forensic examination revealed a crucial detail. Keith had been killed within an hour of his family's murders. The bodies in the trailer had been dead for approximately 12 hours when discovered on November 18th. Keith's body had been dead for 24 to 36 hours when found on November 19th. This meant that Keith had been killed first, likely on the evening of November 17th, and his family had been murdered shortly thereafter, most likely in the early morning hours of November 18th. The timeline raised troubling questions. Had Keith been abducted and murdered first, leaving his family vulnerable? The killer had apparently entered the Dardeen trailer without force, suggesting either that Elaine had answered the door voluntarily or that the perpetrator had gained access through deception. The Dardeen murders sent shockwaves through the rural communities of Jefferson and Franklin counties. Residents who were already on edge from recent unsolved murders now lived in a state of heightened terror. People began openly carrying shotguns. The local coroner was quoted saying that residents were so afraid they wouldn't let strangers into their homes. The fact that the Dardeens appeared to have no enemies made the crime even more terrifying. If this could happen to them, it could happen to anyone. Investigators worked tirelessly, interviewing friends, neighbors, and relatives, searching for any clue. They found nothing. No evidence of affairs, no financial troubles, no criminal connections. The trailer's location, visible from Interstate 57 and situated along Route 37, suggested that the murders may have taken place at night. The proximity to the railroad tracks also raised the possibility that the killer might have been a transient, someone passing through the area with no connection to the family. As the investigation progressed, various theories emerged. Some believed the murders were the work of a drifter or serial killer passing through southern Illinois. The transient nature of the region, with its interstate highways and railroad lines, lent credibility to this story. The amount of effort involved in the crime was particularly puzzling. The killer had taken the time to tug the bodies into bed, clean up the scene, and seemingly felt no urgency to leave, despite being in a location visible from a major highway. This suggested either extreme confidence, psychological pathology, or both. For years, the case remained cold. No suspects emerged. No credible leads materialized. The Dardeen family became yet another unsolved tragedy in a region that had seen too much violence. The case took an unexpected turn more than a decade later. On New Year's Eve, 1999, a man named Tommy Lindsay committed a horrific crime in Del Rio, Texas. He broke into a trailer home and attacked two young girls, 13-year-old Kraylene Katie Harris and 10-year-old Crystal Surlis. Sells murdered Kraylene, stabbing her 17 times. He then slit Crystal's throat, believing he had killed both girls. But Crystal survived. Despite her severe trachea, she managed to walk a quarter-mile to a neighbor's house for help. After receiving emergency medical treatment, she provided police with a description of her attacker. Tommy Lynn Sells was identified and arrested just 2 days later. Sells immediately confessed to Kyleen's murder. Then, while awaiting trial and facing the death penalty, he began confessing to a string of murders across the United States, spanning 3 decades. He called himself the Coast-to-Coast Killer, claiming to have murdered over 70 people as he drifted across the country. Among the murders Sells confessed to were the Dardeen family killings. According to Sells' confession, he had been hitchhiking through southern Illinois in November 1987. He claimed he met Keith Dardeen at a truck stop or pool hall. His story changed. Sells said Keith invited him home for dinner. When they arrived, Sells claimed he pulled out a gun and shot Keith in the head, then mutilated his genitals. Sells claimed he then attacked a family in their trailer, beating Peter and Elaine with the baseball bat, inducing Elaine's labor. When baby Casey was born, Sells said he beat the newborn to death as well. He also claimed that Case had made sexual advances toward him, a claim that would become central to the controversy surrounding his confession. Sells was convicted and sentenced to death for Kylene Harris's murder while on death row in Texas. He continued to confess to numerous other killings. Despite Sells' detailed confession to the Dardeen murders, significant doubts emerged. The state's attorney in Jefferson County, Illinois, ultimately declined to charge Sells with the quadruple homicide. First, while Sells' confession was generally consistent with facts reported in the media, it was inaccurate regarding certain details that had never been made public. These discrepancies suggested that Sells might have been getting his information from news reports rather than actual participation in the crime. Second, Sells changed his story multiple times. He couldn't keep straight how he had met Keith Thaddeum. Was it at a truck stop or a pool hall? This inconsistency raised red flags for investigators. Third, friends and family of the Dardeens found Sells' claims highly implausible. They pointed out that Keith, who had been so fearful of crime that he wouldn't let a young woman use his phone, would never have invited a stranger into his home for dinner. One friend noted, if he wouldn't let a young girl in to use the phone, he wouldn't let a 22-year-old man in. They claimed that Keith had made homosexual advances was also met with skepticism. Those who knew Keith had never perceived him as having any interest in men, and police found no evidence to suggest thus during the investigation. Detectives came to believe that Sells had invented this detail to make the crime seem more justified. Investigators in Illinois wanted to bring Sells to their state to conduct further questioning, but Texas law forbade death row prisoners from leaving the state. This meant that crucial investigative work could never be completed. Tommy Lynn Sells was executed by lethal injection in Huntsville, Texas, on April 3, 2014. When asked if he wanted to make a final statement, he replied, no. He never provided definitive proof of his involvement in the Dardeen murders. To this day, opinions remain divided about whether Sells was responsible. Jefferson County State's Attorney Douglas Hoffman stated a week after Sells' execution that Sells remains the number one suspect. Sheriff Roger Moak agreed. Some investigators believe that when Sells was executed, justice was finally served for the Dardeen family. Others are less certain, while acknowledging that Sells' account is consistent with the general facts of the case. They note that much of what he said had been publicly reported. The inconsistencies in his story and his history of false confessions leave considerable doubt. The case officially remains unsolved. Detective Captain Scott Berg of the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, who has worked to digitize the massive file, describes the progress as moving slowly. Keith's mother, Joanne Dardeen, has spent nearly 4 decades seeking answers. Now in her 80s, she continues to talk about the case to anyone who will listen. At first, she believed Tommy Lynn Sells when he confessed, but as the inconsistencies emerged, her certainty wavered. The passage of time has not diminished her pain or her determination. The Guardian family murders remain one of the most disturbing unsolved cases in American criminal history. The combination of extreme violence, the murder of an entire family including a newborn infant, the mutilation, and the complete absence of a clear motive creates a portrait of a crime that defies any explanation. Was Tommy Lynn Sells responsible? The evidence is inconclusive. He remains the only person ever publicly identified as a suspect, but he was never charged, and significant doubts persist about his confession. Was it the work of another drifter or serial killer passing through the area? Quite possibly. The proximity to major transportation routes and the lack of apparent connection between the killer and the victims suggests someone who struck randomly and moved on. More than 37 years have passed since that terrible November in 1987. The mobile home where the Dardeens live is long gone. The community that was terrorized by these murders has changed, but the questions remained, and some way, someone may still hold the answers. The Darling family deserves justice. 4 innocent lives were taken in the most brutal manner imaginable. A young couple building a life together. A 3-year-old boy, an infant who drew only a few breaths before being murdered. Their story stands as a reminder that evil exists in the world, and that some mysteries may never be solved. But as long as people remember the names Keith, Elaine, Peter, and Casey Dardeen, and as long as investigators continue to pursue leads, however slim, there remains hope that one day the truth will finally emerge from the darkness. The Guardian family murders remain an active cold case. Anyone with information is encouraged to contact the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office in Illinois.